Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Sunday night story time with Skaaro the Red. Previously, in our last chapter, Skaaro barely managed to escape the Golden Falcon after it went up in flames as a result of the mutiny and sabotage. And so last week as I said, Skaaro barely managed to survive that encounter and washed up on the shore of a small jungle island where he ran into a savage tribe of gully dwarves, and we left off there. Now this week, we're gonna go back in time a little bit to when right before the Golden Falcon exploded, because as you can see, we're not playing Skaaro tonight. We're playing on Huijin, and they have a bit of a story of their own that goes on at the same time as last week's chapter. So we're gonna play their chapter tonight. And so this is Chapter 8 of the ridiculous Ballad of Skaaro the Red. When Skaaro charged at Captain Windblade with his hammer raised, Huijin unleashed 3 arrows into him, carefully avoiding any lethal points. Huijin had intentionally wounded the enraged dwarf just enough to facilitate a hasty escape for the captain and himself. While Skaaro was momentarily incapacitated, Huijin slung his bow over his shoulder, grabbed hold of Captain Windblade by the hand, and headed towards the railing. But just before they reached the railing, boom, boom, boom! The Golden Falcon was torn asunder by several large explosions from below deck. Huijin and Captain Windblade were thrown overboard into the water. A short distance from the burning remains of the Golden Falcon, Captain Windblade rose from the sea and surfaced, gasping for air but choking on the smoke. Treading water, she glanced all around, searching for any sign of Huijin, but couldn't see him anywhere. Lifting her shirt over her face and taking a deep breath, Captain Windblade dove under the water and swam beneath the sea searching for Huijin. Beneath the surface, smoldering pieces of the Golden Falcon were sinking into the depths of the Sea of Swords, the burning embers slightly illuminating the dark sea. He must be nearby somewhere, Captain Windblade thought, as she frantically scanned the water around her. At first she couldn't see him, but then some rising air bubbles caught her attention, and looking deeper into the sea, Captain Windblade could see a trail of rising bubbles streamed downwards. Captain Windblade swam deeper, following the trail of bubbles until a limp body began to take shape ahead. Swimming faster, Captain Windblade got beneath the body, and taking hold of it, she began swimming back to the surface. Her lungs burning for breath, and every muscle in her body strained to reach the surface, until finally she emerged again, gasping for breath, but instead inhaling smoke from the Golden Falcon. Clutching the body, she again pulled her shirt up over her face. Then, glancing down to be certain, she immediately noticed his pointed ears protruding from his long golden hair. Captain Windblade swept his hair aside, revealing Huijin's face, and breathed a sigh of relief. Treading water and holding the unconscious Huijin, Captain Windblade scanned her surroundings for something to grab onto. The surface of the water was littered with debris from the Golden Falcon, some of it still burning from the explosion. Captain Windblade noticed a large piece of the ship's deck floating nearby and swam over to it. She rolled Huijin's still unconscious body onto the deck and then pulled herself up. Her attention was immediately upon Huijin. Captain Windblade could tell he wasn't breathing, and began pushing on his chest and blowing air into his mouth. After a moment, Huijin coughed loudly, expelling water from his mouth. Rolling over, he continued to cough water up for several moments, while at the same time choking on the smoke-filled air. Reaching over, Captain Windblade grabbed a piece of wood, which was floating nearby, and used it to row their makeshift raft away from the burning remnants of the Golden Falcon. "Are you okay?" Captain Windblade inquired. Huijin continued to cough for a moment. Unable to speak, he simply nodded at the captain to let her know he was okay. As Huijin recovered, Captain Windblade continued to rapidly paddle their little floating piece of deck away from the cloud of smoke. As they emerged from the cloud and back into clean air, Captain Windblade began rowing more slowly. Looking around, she stated, "The sun be setting in the west, and if I know the stars, then this be eastward, I reckon." Finally, clearing his lungs, Huijin spoke. "Are you all right, Captain?" he asked. "Fine now, thanks to you," she replied. "That mad little dwarf was about to split my skull had you not put him down like the rabid beast he was." Huijin thought it better not to mention that he only wounded Skaaro, and since he was probably killed in the blast, it was of no consequence anyways. "Only Orvalo would know for sure," he said, "but let's just hope we aren't too far from the Sword Coast." They drifted eastward most of the night, taking turns paddling only to stay on course. When the sun began to rise in the morning, Huijin spotted a ship in the distance. Nudging Captain Windblade, Huijin gestured to the south at the approaching ship. Captain Windblade gazed at the ship. "I can't tell who it is from here. Could be pirates or authorities, or even a passing merchant ship. We won't know until they get closer, but one way or another, even the brig of a Valen Navy vessel would be better than drifting across the open sea on a board." It was still some distance away, so Huijin paddled the little floating piece of deck, changing course towards the incoming ship. As they got closer, Captain Windblade stated, "It doesn't look like the ship belongs to any of the regional authorities. But aside from me wee Dirk, we're completely unarmed," gesturing to a small pointed dagger in a sheath on her belt. Huijin nodded. "Whoever it is, we'll be at their mercy, so we better get our story straight," he suggested. "I reckon we tell them we were working aboard a merchant ship when we were attacked by pirates, and during the battle our ship was destroyed," said Captain Windblade. "You know as well as I do, there be warrants for both of us in these parts, and if anyone should recognize us, they'll certainly turn us over for the bounty," she added. "We should change how we look and come up with some false names," said Huijin. Captain Windblade took her dagger from her belt and proceeded to cut all her long golden curly hair until all that remained was short and straight. She then handed the dagger to Huijin, who reluctantly did the same. They couldn't help but laugh a little at each other's uneven and sloppy haircuts. Huijin returned the dagger, and Captain Windblade slid it back into the scabbard, then removing it from her belt and hid it behind her back and under her shirt. "From here on, I'll be Bonnie, and how about we call you Thurnan?" she asked. "That will be fine," Huijin responded. "We'll say we were hired from Waterdeep, and were headed to Moran when the pirates attacked." With that settled, Captain Windblade and Huijin, now known as Bonnie and Thurnan, began shouting and waving frantically at the incoming ship. It wasn't long before a distant shouting could be heard aboard the nearing ship, which moments later altered course and came up alongside Thurnan and Bonnie's floating piece of the deck. The ship was a simple sailing barge, not nearly as big as a galleon like the Golden Falcon, but still larger than the frigates used by many of the raiders in the region. A rope was thrown over the railing of the ship's main deck, which they took hold of, and abandoning the last remnant of the Golden Falcon, Bonnie and Thurnan climbed up the rope and aboard the ship. Once upon the ship's main deck, Bonnie and Thurnan found themselves surrounded by men with swords and crossbows pointed at them. "That's far enough. Keep your hands where we can see 'em, and have a seat on the deck," a voice ordered loudly. Bonnie and Thurnan held up their hands and slowly sat down on the deck. A large man, with long red hair and a short beard, stepped forward. He was dressed in simple leather clothing with a few pieces of makeshift armor strapped on his shoulder and chest. Wielding a longsword and looking down at Thurnan and Bonnie, he said, "These are dangerous waters. One can't be too careful around these parts." Lowering his sword, he continued, "But looks like you already run into some trouble, so what brings you two along this way?" Thurnan glanced at Bonnie, who promptly replied, "We were working as swabbers aboard a merchant ship headed for Moran when we were attacked by raiders. They destroyed our ship and we barely made it out alive." "How many ships attacked you?" the large man in the red hair asked. "Just one," Bonnie answered, "but our ship was carrying some highly flammable oils, and when they fired on us, our ship caught fire and exploded." The red-headed man considered their story for a moment and responded, "Well," he said skeptically, "you can call me Captain Jaron. We run a salvage operation out of Valen, and we had heard rumors that a few days ago some notorious pirates took out some raider frigates in the area. Maybe it was some of the same pirates you have encountered. We don't know anything about the pirates that attacked us, Thurnon answered, except that they were flying a black standard with a golden bird on it. Captain Jared nodded and said, "That sounds like them." Turning to his crewmen, he ordered loudly, "Have them bring us a boat, and we'll head back to safer waters for now." Then he whispered something to the crewman nearest himself and walked away. "Wait, what about us?" Bonnie asked, but Captain Jaron ignored her and continued on his way. "Let's go, you two," another of the crewmen said. With several crossbows still trained on them, Bonnie and Thurnon were led below deck and into a cell in the ship's brig. "You'll stay here for now," a crewman said, as he slammed shut the cell's barred door. "How long are you going to keep us locked up?" Bonnie asked. "Until the captain says otherwise," he replied, and then left the brig. Once they were alone, Bonnie waited a few minutes, then said, "I think they believed us, but if they take us back to Valen, we could be recognized. Somebody would definitely turn us in for the bounty." Huijin agreed, "But if it comes to that, Coralon willing, we can avoid any entanglements with the authorities and perhaps make our way further inland to Tether." "I'd rather steal a ship and get back out on open waters," Bonnie stated. "We're wanted in most every city along the Sword Coast from Moran to Waterdeep. There isn't a single place in Faerun we'd be safe." "Without a crew, we won't be sailing a fishing boat, much less a galleon," Thurnon retorted. "I'm not saying we hang up our sabers and take up farming, just that perhaps we should lay low a while and go further inland, where we are less well known." Just then, the brig's outside door opened, and another of the ship's crewmen entered, carrying with him 2 bowls of stew, each with a spoon. "Dinner time," he said cheerfully. One at a time, he passed the bowls through a slot in the bars to Bonnie and Thurnon. "Thank you," Thurnon said. "Do you happen to know where we're headed?" he asked. "Sorry," said the crewman. "I'm not allowed to talk with you right now, but I think the captain will be along soon." And then the crewman left the brig, closing the door behind him. Until now, Bonnie and Thurnon hadn't even realized how hungry they were, and they heartily gulped down their meals. "Perhaps you're right about laying low, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it," Bonnie said. "For now, let's just focus on getting out of here and finding out where we are going." Soon after they finished their meal, Captain Jaron entered the brig. Following him was a crewman carrying several mugs of ale. Captain Jaron opened the cell door and offered them a mug of ale. "You must be thirsty," he said. Bonnie and Thurnon accepted the ale and gulped it down happily. Pulling up a chair, Captain Jaron sat down and said, "We're headed back to Velen for now, and I'm willing to offer you passage on my ship, but you'll work for it. The ship's quartermaster, Yarville, can always use a couple more swabbers." Bonnie and Thurnon glanced at each other momentarily. "I think we can manage that," Thurnon said, as they nodded in agreement. "Depending on how well you do, we may even consider offering you further work on our future voyages." Bonnie and Thurnon thanked the captain and headed back up to the main deck to meet the quartermaster. Yarville was a serious-looking man, tall and thin, with long, dark gray hair tied in a ponytail and a thin goatee on his chin. The quartermaster eyed them closely, and after pausing a moment, he gave them their duties and assigned them a bunk in the crew's quarters. The quartermaster then rushed away rather abruptly. After seeing to their work for the rest of the day, Bonnie and Thurnon met below deck in the ship's hold, behind some crates and out of sight. Speaking in hushed whispers to avoid being overheard, Bonnie said, "We'll have to kill the captain and take this ship before it reaches Valen." "We wouldn't stand a chance," Thurnon stated. "Our only hope now is to ride this out and sneak out of Valen without being recognized." Just then, Thurnon held up his hand and put his fingers to his lips, certain he had heard something, perhaps even caught a glimpse of a shadow moving out of the corner of his eye. Thurnon crept around the crates in the cargo hold to see what it was, but found nothing. Going back to Bonnie, "We should get out of here before anyone gets suspicious," Thurnon suggested. Bonnie agreed, and they quietly slipped out of the cargo hold and back up to the crew quarters to bunk for the night. And that's all for Chapter 8 of the ridiculous Ballad of Skaaro the Red. And so tonight we saw Huijin and Captain Windblade survive not only survive the explosion, of the Golden Falcon, but they also managed to escape the scene for the moment and seem to be on their way to Valen. And if you don't know anything about Valen, it's a ghost city. So some more of that coming up in the future. Next week we'll be back with more, and we'll probably switch back to Skaaro again for the next chapter, and then alternate in the future until the story plays out. This was originally supposed to be what I was going to consider a short story, but it's already gone well beyond that, I guess. To tell the tale of how Skaaro got to where he is now, and as well as Huijin and the others, I guess we got to tell the whole tale, and a little bit longer than I expected it to be, but that's all the same. As long as everyone's enjoying it, give it some thumbs up, some likes, share it with your friends. If anybody you might think may enjoy this kind of material, pass it around, give it the upvotes, and subscribe to my channels. I post these videos on YouTube. I do the Twitch video here every Sunday night at twitch.tv/SkaaroTheRed. And then after I do the Twitch videos, I upload the videos on YouTube and also on SoundCloud. And I post everything on Twitter and on my Facebook. You can find me on there as Skaaro and SkaaroTheRed. And but I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and watching, and we'll see you next Sunday, and possibly in between now and then if there's any interesting content I may stream, or may do some more intermediate kind of Neverwinter videos and stuff. So once again, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. This has been SkaaroTheRed.